Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope all of you are doing well today. So in this video I'm going to be discussing working with Santa Muerte in a traditional way versus working with her in a non-traditional way. Now in this video I didn't really prepare for it. I didn't write down a list of like talking points or anything, so this is kind of just off the cuff. But I know that if you are starting out as a devotee and you are very drawn to Santa Muerte, but you don't resonate with the traditional methods for working with her, you may be drawn to working with her in non-traditional ways, and you may receive a lot of pushback from the community, or you may even, read books, read articles, and they pretty much all say you have to work with her a very specific way, or you may even come across different books with contradicting ways of them saying you have to work with her. And even the people who work with her traditionally can't even always agree on the way she should be approached. There's a general consensus that we use traditional Catholic prayer, the personata, just certain Catholic prayers in order to approach the altar. And when we work with her, having certain things on the altar, like a statue or an image of Saint Michael, in order to kind of temper the necromantic death energies that are associated with the Santa Muerte, because she is a death deity, or and certain things on the altar as well. And even her, even things relating to her image and the way she appears, there's a lot of strong opinions about it. So originally I worked with her in a very traditional way. I used all the Catholic prayers. My family is kind of Catholic, but we never really went to church regularly. It was kind of absent from our lives, religion. And so whenever I was working with La Santa Muerte originally, I started learning, the Our Father, the Saint Michael prayer, all those prayers. I never really knew them before. And only through the constant repetition every time I would go to the altar. So eventually I did have all those prayers memorized. And I only memorized them because it was part of the, communion process of coming to La Santa Muerte's altar. Now, over time, I never really liked those prayers. They were nice. Like I have a really deep appreciation for most religions, and no religion is perfect, I think, but I think there's benefits to all of them. And I think Catholicism can be beautiful in its own way, but certain prayers or even certain lines from certain prayers didn't really sit well with me. I know there's a line in like the Saint Michael prayer where it says something about like, I don't know, it just talks bad about Satan or something, or Lucifer. And to me, I don't really necessarily, subscribe to the biblical views on a lot of things and a lot of beings, because I think the Bible was written by a lot of men with very specific viewpoints, and so I think a lot of stuff can kind of get lost in translation. And people demonize a lot of beings, and other people work with these beings and they have very beneficial, positive, or even nurturing relationships. And I really also, because of another thing I do, it happens to me. I don't think it happens to other people very much. Sometimes when I think about beings, I accidentally call out to them. They come to me, and it's nothing I do on purpose. It just happens to me. And also, I don't know if it's because I have too much integrity or a guilt complex, but I kind of feel bad, saying certain lines that kind of are disparaging against other beings, even if the beings are quote unquote evil. I don't really like to do that. I know that sounds probably a little weird, but that's just how I've always kind of been. And so I think that if you are like me, you have trouble resonating with some aspects of the Catholic or the traditional approach, which is with a lot of prayers, usually Catholic prayers. Now, personally, I don't really do that anymore. I have a different method for approaching the altar. I'm not saying that she would want everyone to approach her in this way, and I imagine everyone has a different relationship with her. I feel like it's not that she's more lenient with some people, although she may very well be, because everything is up to her own discretion. I think that she expects certain things from certain people. And I think some people, she may ask them to approach her in specific ways. And I feel like other times it's more open to interpretation a little bit. Now, working with Santa Muerte is not a religion. There are traditional ways, there's simply tradition. And because it's not an official religion exactly, there isn't a list of commandments, a list of do or don'ts. Obviously, we have general guidelines that we all abide by, things involving respect and things like that. But when it comes to approaching her and working with her, it kind of varies person to person, devotee to devotee, because some devotees do not practice magic. Some of them purely pray to her. Some of them worship her and are part of what we would consider a cult, a literal cult. Some people have a very casual relationship with her. Some people, their whole life revolves around working with her. And it's the same when approaching her. I think that the lines between traditional and non-traditional can sometimes get a little bit blurred. And I think of them more as general guidelines. And it's a good rule of thumb to approach her that way. But if you feel so strongly opposed to that, or if you already have a certain manner of working, let's say you were a necromancer, or you were involved in like left-hand path or like darker kinds of magic, obviously you wouldn't want to start saying Catholic prayers when approaching a Santa Muerte. But if she's been coming to you, then you'd probably be confused. Or if you're somebody who just wasn't really raised religiously, it may not resonate with you. And it may be as simple as that. Now, I've seen a couple of books relating to La Santa Muerte that have, the typical or the traditional prayers for approaching her. And then I've seen other books, sometimes in the same book, other ways of approaching her, usually from a pagan perspective, calling on the elements instead of like the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You may be calling on different elements or elemental spirits, things like that. I don't really do that. My opening prayers to her are prayers just between me and her. I wrote my own prayer and I recite it every time I go to the altar, and I recite a prayer every time I leave the altar. And I think the most important thing about prayers that we use is that we achieve, it helps us to kind of flip a switch in our minds to kind of attune ourselves to reach in a kind of an altered state a little bit. I think that's the real goal, to make you more able to pick up and receive messages and intuitive hits. So I think that, really we could really talk at length about traditional approaches versus non-traditional ways of working with La Santa Muerte. I think that as more people learn about her, and more people from different walks of life and other religious backgrounds start working with her, and as the internet continues to grow and her devotees continue to grow in number, we're going to start seeing more people come forward with their alternate ways of approaching with her, alternate ways of working with her. And I think that it's going to become more commonplace as more time passes. I mean, it's already starting to happen. And I think that, the way people work with La Santa Muerte may look drastically different 50 years from now. And I think that the way we all work with her now, because this is still growing and she's still fairly new to humans. I know there are some hidden cults that go back with her way farther. And I know some things about her that go back probably even farther than that. But as far as the way people approach her, I mean, it's kind of up to you. It's kind of between you and her. I think the traditional ways should not be just thrown away. They're important. They're an important part of her history, of her current history. And they're an important, part of the culture that surrounds her. And I think that going through the trouble of learning all the prayers, especially if you memorize them, I think it's a genuine and good gesture. But if they don't resonate with you, then maybe you just need to talk to her about it, or write your own prayers and see how she reacts to that. A lot of stuff is a person by person basis with her, I feel like. I know for a fact that there are other devotees who absolutely are not Catholic. They are practically the opposite of Catholic, or very much in the left-hand path, and they work with her in a very much non-traditional way. But I know that their way, they are reaching her just like I'm reaching her in my own way. And I think that as more time passes, we'll find that it's not exactly, or maybe I feel like it right now, it's not necessarily the approach exactly, but it's just about the connection. And as long as you're making a genuine connection, I think that's the most important thing. You know, obviously, when you approach, you always want to approach with reverence and respect. But at the same time, you know, if you're doing things that don't resonate with you, or things, or even more so, things that are maybe even like not offensive to you, but things that are almost bothersome to you, in order to make this, you know, to bridge the gap between you and La Santa Muerte, then I think maybe it would behoove you to reevaluate your approach with her, and maybe, you know, just talk to her, communicate with her. Communication, like I always say, is the most important thing when working with her. And if there's some aspect of your practice that you feel is out of balance, that you feel like you could rectify by changing something up, then I would say probably it's okay to do it, but you need to talk to her about it. I think it's fine if you want to talk to people in your community relating to La Santa Muerte, if there's something you want to change. But remember, people have very strong opinions. They feel very strongly about La Santa Muerte because she's very important to a lot of people. And the discourse surrounding working with her traditionally versus non-traditionally can be very heated because people feel very strongly. There are people who work with her, like I said, very casually. There are people who work with her in a more of a regular kind of a way, I guess. People who are magical practitioners who work with her. And then there are people whose whole identity is ingrained deeply in being a devotee. It's their entire existence from sun up to sundown. And when you have such a broad scope of people who work with her, you're going to have a broad scope of people who feel different things and think different things. And these are sometimes going to be extremely strong opinions. So I would say don't let anyone convince you that anything is set in stone with La Santa Muerte. Again, there is always general guidelines. You know, we can't ignore certain things about La Santa Muerte. You know, that she is death related. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore that she is a necromantic being, that she's a psychopomp. She has to do with the afterlife and spirits and death. Very much a part of her. But other things, like the ways we approach her, it feels so personal. And I think that because it's not a religion, being a devotee, it kind of varies person to person. You know, if everyone who works with her was to type up an article about the way they approach her, I imagine there's going to be a lot of ones that stand out for being very different or non-traditional. Or some can be traditional, but even not go overboard, but take the Catholic thing and run with it even further and have a much more elaborate approach along those guidelines. So, you know, some people will have an elaborate, long, lengthy ritual just to approach the altar. Some people might just sit down right at the altar and just start talking. Everyone is different. But I think that the longer you work with her, you'll know what she appreciates and what she doesn't. And you'll know what works and what doesn't. And when you're working with her in a non-traditional way and your approach works and you have a beautiful relationship with her, don't let other people dissuade you from trying something a little bit different, especially if it isn't disrespectful or hurting anyone. Because a lot of people try to micromanage one another, and honestly, it's not really the kind of thing that you should be kind of policing other devotees about. You know, the only person whose opinion matters with any of this is the opinion of La Santa Muerte. And if you try a non-traditional approach and she has no problem with it, then you're not doing anything wrong. And despite what some, you know, really diehard traditionalists might tell you. So this is just my opinion. You know, you're more than welcome to disagree with it if you don't agree with what I'm saying. But yeah, that's pretty much all I really want to say about this topic and regarding a traditional approach versus non-traditional approaches. There are better videos out there with like facts and like, you know, statistics or whatever with like, you know, I don't know, better examples than mine. But if you are unsure about approaching her in a traditional or non-traditional way, I would say kind of feel it out for yourself. I would say try the traditional way at first, but if you know, are really feeling like it's not really working for you, then maybe it's time to try a different approach, right? So with that being said, if you would like to support the channel, I have a Patreon link down below where you can reach me all the time, basically. I don't really reply to comments the way I used to, but you're welcome to comment down below if you have any questions relating to Santa Muerte or really anything spiritual that I've ever covered on my channel. And thank you all so much for watching, and I will see all of you in the next one. Take care.